Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I am delighted to be talking with author, creator, cartoonist Lonnie Millsap. Lonnie, welcome to the show and thanks for coming on.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. You have numerous collected comics to talk about. I'm just going to mention three very interesting titles. One
Okay.
of them being They Taste Like Bacon.
Right.
I asked for a fork, and my favorite of these three, I stepped on a duck.
Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, lots of humor, lots of creating that's out there. I generally ask about the path to start out with. So, how did you know that comics was the place where you wanted to do some creating?
Well, it was always, from when I was young, it was always something that I wanted to do, but I didn't know if there was any pathway to get
Hmm.
to what I wanted to do. I'm super old, and there weren't computers at the beginning, and you know, so I would always do these cartoons, and didn't really have much of an outlet. Uh, I think when I first really wanted to become a cartoonist, I had a class between high school and college at Otis Art Institute just for a summer,
Hmm.
and the teacher, his name was Gary Panter, and he does he won Emmy awards for Pee Wee's Playhouse, the
Oh,
set design for Pee Wee's Playhouse. But he's also known as the grandfather of punk rock art. I mean, and so that summer, he was the one who said, "Oh, well, you should get sketchbooks, and draw your stuff. It's pretty funny."
hmm.
And so that's when I formalized that part a little bit. But
Hmm.
then going into college, I was uh, in the college newspapers just a little bit. You know, the I think I would supply them with the worst cartoons, and nobody sort of wanted to run those, and so I was probably in there like 10 times over 5 years, and but I was just drawing in the sketchbooks, just sort of waiting, I think, for the future to get there. And there was a point for the first book, which was titled "My Washcloth Stinks." Um,
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
was sort of a collection of all those cartoons that led up to that. Like 40 years worth of cartoons. And uh, but then I was able to self-publish at that point. Hire a printing company to run off 1,000 books, and uh, it got in some people's hands uh, initially. It got back in Gary Panter's hands, and he's friends with Matt Groening, and they had a show of outside artists, and I was one of them, and uh, the response was pretty good then, and I just decided to keep it going after that. So I pretty much put out like a book every year and a half, just trying to build on that very first time, which was 2010,
Hmm.
11.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was a real late start, you know.
Well, as they say, it's never too late.
Right, right.
Yeah,
I'm proof.
yeah. Well, interesting to hear about the path. Anything that you'd like to share about the process, including kind of inspirations, because you have these titles that are very personal, close at hand, and also sort of those funny parts of everyday life. So curious about that.
Well, when you mentioned I stepped on a duck, my father used to say that when I was young,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and I was like, well, that's a good title for a book. The way I laid out the cover too, though, about 15% of the people think it says I stepped on a dick. So I don't,
Oh, no.
so yeah, I noticed that a lot at conventions and stuff. But yeah, I just, in the titles, um, I'm just searching for something that's sort of catchy,
Mhm.
things that just sort of come to mind at times. I have like, pages of titles, but I just always have to figure out which one is going to be right for that book and which cartoon is in the book that's going to inspire the title.
Mhm.
Uh, um, that very first one, my washcloth stinks. It was inspired by that.
Right, right.
you know, I think everyone has one washcloth. It doesn't matter what you do to it.
Yes,
It'll
it's
just sort
just
of
ready
retain
to
it
go.
no matter what. Yeah, so that's the one that you got to use to wash the car.
Yeah.
But Uh, so yeah, that's where the inspiration from those comes
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's everyday life. It's just part of being human. So I love that part of it.
from.
And
Yeah,
distilled kind of like short takes on that as well. So I imagine that's kind of a challenge to get it down to something that is pretty short as well.
I do. And as far as the titles, I actually try to have sort of almost a rhyming cadence with all the titles.
Hmm.
Like just a certain amount of syllables.
Yeah.
That's just sort of uh, my little go-to there. Um, and then as far as the cartoons, it's not the same as that, but just try to be succinct in what I say. I know that earlier in my career, I tend to be a little wordy, when I look back on it. And so I think I've sort of cut the fat out of what I say. And it's worked a little.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a poetry to those titles too. It's kind of like the first time you read classic poetry and you're like, wow, this has this many syllables in it, and you kind of read it and
Right,
don't notice it until you go back and really pay attention to it. And it's like, oh, this
right,
is this is why this works and why that song is so catchy and just
right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's just if you don't read the words, but you just read the sounds, or you just sort of burr, 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 burr,
Mm-hmm,
all of
hmm.
them, all of them have that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
love it, love it. And I love the thought process that goes into that too and the attention to that.
yeah, yeah, I try. And then,
Yeah.
I design them all, I print them all, I do, all the layout and everything. So it's just all my process. And the idea was initially, um, you know, uh, I would go into bookstores and look at cartoon books, and I always felt like I could do it, but I didn't feel like I had an avenue, to
Mm-hmm.
to get in and do it. I've never had a publisher or anything, um, so I just sort of copied sort of the way that other authors sort of did the legal page and stuff like that. But I always just did the book that I wanted to read, and so that's where I've ended up.
Love it. Love it. Um, that kind of goes to that book that I've always wanted to read. Comment goes to the question of what is it about comics? What makes it this special place for you to kind of share creatively the way that you'd like to?
Well, I mean, the payoff from people sort of understanding some of them and laughing, I really enjoy the way that feels.
Yeah.
Yeah. I there's times where people say they don't get it. Some of them, and of course, I get every cartoon, and I'm not gonna go around explaining cartoons to people, but in my mind, they're all understandable and they're all funny.
Uh-huh.
But of course, I've seen a lot of sites that say differently. but
Well,
that's come up over the past few days actually. But um, uh, if I can get a good percentage of people, to look at and sort of understand maybe 60 to 70% of what's going on, uh, it's really satisfying. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
I do a fair amount of conventions. San Diego Comic Con, LA Comic Con, and some of the other ones, and I can see that what I do is kind of catchy. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
and you don't have to. For me to promote myself, I don't really have to, give sort of a synopsis of what I do. All I have to do is show what I do, and it only takes a second to get it. You either like it or
Hmm.
you. But I just love sort of the interaction that doing the artwork creates, you know, and I love seeing people laugh and to uh, I think I got that, doing that stuff when I was younger, and my parents would see that stuff, they would laugh, and I get sort of the same feeling for when anybody else sees the work and gets a chuckle out of it, you know.
Yeah.
Um, my first book was the idea behind that first book was to probably get like 9 laughs out of 144 pages because when I would look at other books, I would only get like three. I figure I can do 3 times that, so,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know,
Those goals along the way, I love it.
right, right.
Um, So what is next creatively, and both as far as conventions, spaces where you'll be in that way, but also kind of next steps in creation? Is there a project that's currently in development that you can talk about?
I'm working on my 12th book.
12.
It-
Wow.
yeah, it's not titled yet. Um, it will be ready by July.
Nice. Nice.
I'll be finished with it by then. It will be, 144 pages of the same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Also right now, my cartoons appear in the New Yorker, and that's not a consistent thing, but since 2018, I've been in there over 60 times. So
Very
it's
impressive.
yeah. So I was in there last week. I'm in there this week, and it's kind of a good feeling. My cartoon is the caption contest one right
Hmm.
now,
Hmm.
the final for that. But um, I don't have any large project that I'm working on now. There's always something on the edge of maybe happening.
Hmm.
So all I can do is hope that things, sort of uh, go through. But so the New Yorker thing is a very consistent thing as far as me submitting. And yeah, the book is the next big thing. And I have WonderCon coming up next uh, in Anaheim in a couple of weeks. So that's probably the maybe the third largest convention that I do.
That's
So
cool. Very cool.
yeah, yeah, it's
And
sort of low key right now.
oh yeah, yeah. Just the New Yorker, very, very low key.
That's just it's very lucky. I feel very lucky to have been even to have even gotten one in there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the feeling when it first happened uh, was kind of surreal. Because I remember I was having a bad day, and and that happened, and I was hanging out with a friend, and she was like, "Well, how come you're not happy?" And I was like, "I am happy, but the day was bad." So I was very low key in that. So I'm not one to jump around and stuff when that happens because I don't want something bad to counteract that.
Right,
you know,
right.
but but it's a great feeling to be sort of involved with all that, and uh the a lot of the people that I've gotten to meet because of what I do, like talking to you right now, was I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't draw cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
I've met sort of people like Sergio Aragonis, who's I'm a big fan of,
Hmm.
um, and you know he seems to like my work. That makes me feel good.
That's always a good
uh,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, just very satisfying to do what I do, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it sounds like there's probably a New Yorker collection on the way at some point.
Boy, I hope so.
That would also be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of dog cartoons in there. To me, they're very similar, and I don't even own a dog right now, but um, they seem to like those, and I'll give them one or two a week. So
Nice. Love it. Love it. Well, I know that your books are out there in a lot of places online and people can go to conventions and meet you and get them, but is there a sort of a best place where people can go to check out the cartoons, to buy the books and support you?
probably the best place to check out my cartoons is on Go Comics.
Cool,
That
cool.
that's
Mhm,
the my strip is titled Bacon. All those cartoons are considered bacon, actually
mhm,
bacon, because there's a umlaut over the O,
mhm, mhm.
for clarification. But uh, I put cartoons there every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Some are new, some are repeats, but I have like a large volume of cartoons. Sometimes the older ones I'll put on and people don't get a chance. I feel like they didn't get a chance to see them earlier in my career.
Mhm.
Um, and then to buy the books, they can just come to my website, lonniemillsap.com. And if you order them, I'll send them, you know,
Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah.
and I do it from here, and I don't take a long time to send them back, and I'll sign them. So, you know, I try to do what I can.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Lonnie, I appreciate the time. Appreciate getting the chance to meet you and talk about cartooning, and glad to have you back anytime to
Oh,
talk
it's my
about
pleasure.
all other
Thank you for
things.
having me. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Absolutely.